Welcome to another episode of the Data Engineering Show.
Welcome, everyone.
Eldad, how are you?
I'm great.
Yeah?
Always good to visit.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
You didn't come over for Shabbos dinner last night.
That's the only place we meet on podcasts.
With us today, Yoav Shmaria, VP R&D of the SaaS platform at Similarweb. Yoav, how are you?
Never better. How are you guys?
Thanks for joining. So Yoav from Similarweb. Similarweb, if you haven't heard, is an amazing data product. Similarweb are a market intelligence and research platform, publicly traded as of last year. Yoav, tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are at Similarweb. How did your career evolve?
My personal journey in Similarweb?
Yes, even before. Because you have a nice mix of software engineering, data technologies, and now management of R&D groups.
Yes. So basically, I started my journey as an entrepreneur during my studies, actually. So I had some touch in doing everything, from full stack development, marketing, sales, and we had some specialty around payments and registration platforms. And I found my career journey starting in Similarweb as a front-end developer, actually, not in data. I have a very strong connection with product management, with business management, and I think this capabilities took me to start managing within the organization, and eventually 2.5 years ago, I'm already 6 years in Similarweb, actually. I joined when my big daughter was 6 months old, and now she's 6 years old. So that's quite a journey. And for the last 2.5 years, I'm leading the R&D group of our main B2B product. We call it Pro internally. And when I started my current role, we were a bit less than 30 employees. Today, we are over 80. 15 of them are located in Ukraine, the rest in Tel Aviv. And I think that my biggest leap was actually when I started leading the entire group. So I had to deep dive into the entire data ecosystem in our organization, which was an amazing and still an amazing journey. Basically in my group, I have two main positions separated into backend engineers and front-end engineers. And what's special in our group in Similarweb that the backend developers are basically doing some kind of full stack backend engineering. We call it data server. It's a mix of data engineering, focusing on ingesting data into different databases, and the backend layer for the API.
So before we dive into that super interesting stack, which we want to really dive deep into, tell the audience in your own words about what Similarweb does and the role data plays at Similarweb.
Yeah. So what usually people getting hard to understand about Similarweb is that we are not giving you some insights above your data. We are giving insights about everyone else's data. And the simplest way to describe it is Google Analytics for the entire internet, okay? Which is basically we are giving analysis across any or almost any domain, and also mobile apps. And basically we divide our use cases into 5 separate solutions. So we are starting with the general research. So today, most of the marketing budget goes to digital, not to paperwork and not radio. And the journey usually starts with research when we're getting some strategy decisions around how my market looks like. So I want to get into the website builder market. Who are the main players, in which countries they are, and how the audience looks like.
So if I'm, for example, a digital marketer at Zara, clothing company, what do I do with the Similarweb application?
Boys, did you offer your friends something to eat?
It's remote, Mom. They're not physically with us.
Did you talk about Firebolt?
The podcast is not about Firebolt, Mom.
Did you tell your friends it's the fastest cloud data warehouse?
Mom, we're in the middle. Please close the door. We'll talk later.
So first of all, we would like to explore the fashion industry worldwide, maybe to get some trends around rising countries or some rising audiences, to, find new competitors, understand maybe the market is getting a lot of traffic from, let's say, display ads. Let's say that in average, most of the fashion websites getting 10% from display ads, and I'm getting only 2% for my traffic. So maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe the audience for fashion really loves banners. Okay, so this is like very, very high level market insight. And then we are going into the competitive research. We call it the digital marketing to optimize for each channel, for the SEO, PPC, media buying, affiliate manager. These personas are doing tactical actions like tracking search engine position, tracking their campaigns, understand competitors' performance, and basically doing this benchmark with Zara.com against any other brand, and understand what are the differences in terms of traffic performance.
So given that this is such a data-centric product, let's go back again to your team. So
Yeah.
How do you call them? The data backend team?
Well, the data server.
Data server.
So actually, in my group, we are doing everything. I mean, it's data engineering, backend, frontend, QA, but the back. I don't have a single backend developer that's doing only API coding and data engineers. It's like a full stack data server engineer. And we changed it. Actually, 4 years ago, we had a separate group for data engineering and a web group for backend and frontend. And we realized that, especially for a product like us, it's super important that the person who modeling the data and the person who is actually serving the data should be the same person. And this is how we started to get data engineering stack for our backend developers.
So what titles do the engineers in that group have? Do they call themselves software engineers? Do they call themselves data engineers?
So in our HR system, it's data server engineer, but most of them on LinkedIn, I guess they are somewhere between backend engineers, software engineers.
So it's software engineer building data-centric products.
Yeah. We do separate the front end from the back end, but the back end is not trivial back end at all.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And we love that. I think one of the calls, it came up that, let's say 10, 15 years ago, if you asked a software engineer to, build a database or data warehouse or query engine kind of project, people used to look down on that, add something beneath their payroll. Today, the most interesting software projects, the hottest thing in software is to build data-rich applications. And it's a huge shift in the market.
Yeah, actually, I love to call it that in Similarweb, we are doing data engineering upside down. In most of our organization, and probably you also, I find data engineering on the is some offline processing, right? It's saved for BI and analytics. It's not part of the real production. Maybe we are hosting some database with a lot of data to serve something, but we don't have an entire data engineering operation for production. In Similarweb, it's the opposite. We are like analyzing the entire internet, and we have this funnel to give real-time insights to our customers.
So let's talk about the data stack. So what runs there in the data server?
So everything. I won't deep dive into the entire stack of our data collection methods and the machine learning and everything. As I said, it's data engineering all over the place here. But in my group, so we have shared data lake that we are storing on AWS, which is a very nice name for tons of files, Parquet ORC. There we are using the glue catalog of AWS, and very important detail for Similarweb. We are managing a branch system, a data versioning methodology for our data. That's because we have multiple algorithms running to calculate our traffic estimations, and we are changing them from time to time. So we are always running with some master branch for our data. And then we having actually in production a mechanism to show our customers a beta branch. So look, we upgraded our estimations, take a look, we are validating it for some period of time. And when we are deciding it's good enough, So we need to take a decision whether we are starting a new breaking point with a new algorithm, or we are running back 3 months or 3 years of data. Actually, very soon, next quarter, we're going to run entire 3 years of our mobile web data.
So what you're saying is customers are moving away from software versions to data versions. To them, that's actually much more interesting to be able to play with versions and to be able to kind of understand the data that's driving the results. And that's also a very big shift from how engineering looks at the world. I wanted to ask someone with your background, what was the experience in trying to really reorganize an engineering organization that is kind of, right? It's more traditional, looks at data as something that's decoupled. How do you reorg from 20 engineers to 80, but also not just grow in size, but really rewire how that organization operates on data? How was the experience?
Yeah, so actually, I think something that really helped me is that we are running in my group historically very strong horizontal teams methodology. That means that we have a metrics organization, and there are a lot of methodologies in agile development. What we are doing is that I have a data server team, and each team member is, or a couple of them, taking part in a different squad of delivery. And this really helped me to keep knowledge on this in this team. So we are not losing control that in every team, everybody doing whatever they understand. So we have a very solid layer of data engineering stack. Now, what we did change when I got into the role, I think we had like 2 ETLs, running on a very premature airflow. And what we did is that we started to take, and that's a great lesson. We started to basically take 2 or 3 engineers every quarter, okay, from all around the squads, and dealing with the infrastructure. And I think our 2 main tasks that we took when I entered the role was first, creating solid infrastructure for ETL abstraction, so that every new engineer can pretty easily run a trivial ETL. Yeah, I'm not talking about very complex stack, but let's say we are using DynamoDB a lot. So if I want to just take a very simple collection from S3 buckets and write it to DynamoDB, it will be like 2 hours of work, okay? And you have a running ETL, supporting branching, everything. It was a big deal. We invested a lot on it. And the second was to find more databases that we can serve to production, because historically, we used HBase a lot, which is amazing for concurrency and really fast querying like the data, but the structure is very key value oriented. It's like you are keeping a very dummy data structure for a specific key. You can scale, but you cannot really run complex analysis over the data. So this was the main 2 initiatives that we took with some kind of virtual team of infrastructure.
What data volumes do you guys deal with?
So it depends. It's basically per feature. So I think our largest database in production is around 150 terabytes compressed, of course, and this is for part of our digital research product, and in the digital marketing for the keywords data set, we have also a data set that is some dozens of terabytes, but it's crossing the trillion rows of data. Other than that, we have more than 100 ETLs of data ingestions running every day or month. So we have, I think, over 30 or 40 tables in DynamoDB, and in general, I think we are running over petabyte in production. And that's, of course, only what we serve, which is 3 years of data. And we have more in our data lake.
When you set out to, the
Comfy.
when you set out on the journey you mentioned before around, the versioning of the data, I think that's something that, is becoming, like Eldad said, more interesting. Would you recommend for people who want to go into that direction to take it on? Because it feels like there's no clear sort of market standard how to go about it. People are trying to figure out. There's even startups and companies being built around that area, like Lakefs. What's your take? What do you recommend?
Wow, take for data versioning, you say. So first of all, let's understand the challenge, right? Because theoretically, you can say, okay, so I have new version, let's override. The problem is that you would like, first of all, sometimes you would like to show to customers in production, like us, 2 different versions. And of course, before you release the production, you would like to have some staging product that you can test. So you want to be able to work seamlessly with the 2 versions, maybe more. Actually, we're doing a lot of infrastructure work right now on it. But I think the main area to plan is for the actual serving layer, for the databases, because in data lake, as you say, like Lakefs, where you have a lot of methods to manage like data versions. But eventually, I have let's take DynamoDB table. So I have one table, and now I have another version. So whether I want to manage a table per version, and then if I want to take 12 months from one and then from another, that's one kind of complexity. We historically using a lot prefix or suffix with like the branch name, okay? But you will need to design it in advance, because otherwise you will get into a situation that you want to write, and again, I'm talking about the serving itself. You want to write only part of the data for the new branch, and you're willing to think how they both merge together. And in big data, if you want to union data or join, it's not always a trivial task, and you can lose performance for that. So I would say modeling the serving data, I think that's the most complex part, because as you say, there are many. I think also Delta Lake now have some solutions for the versions, but when we're talking about serving, that's not trivial at all. We are still struggling, by the way, what is more relevant. And when you are running some analytics engine on the data, it's even more complex.
What do you mean you're struggling? You told me everything was perfect before the call.
Nothing is perfect.
The versions are related to the models, right? Different model versions require different data versions, which is translated into a feature version. And the challenge is across every step, right? And you've mentioned up to the serving part, but then it starts much earlier. This is why versioning in lakes is becoming such a hot topic. It's connected to ML, it's connected to models, and
of course you need to hold some metadata store for your versions, right? Like, okay, so now I have multiple versions all over the place. Somebody needs to hold this information.
Which in your case is what metadata store?
So we are using it's an in-house solution. It's a simple database that we are holding relational database with some service that we wrote. But again, think about it. It's something that is in your critical path, right? Because unless you have some cache in place, so you need to go through this service always to ask, wait, where do I get the data from? This is your router, basically. So that's also a critical part.
It's wired into the product versus just kind of looking at different versions to figure out which report
again, I won't rewrite out my entire data always, right? I would rather only write parts of it. So I want to hold the changes somewhere that I can serve seamlessly. Let's say a perfect graph, but it's a combination of 5 different versions of data.
Let's continue down that path. Testing. So how do you go about, testing your data?
So again, testing is all over the place. As part of the modeling, of course, there's data weighting and everything. In our part, so we are running, we have a very large stack of automation testing that's running on the product and seeing like the final results. What is important, again, in our life, that we have a window release and snapshot release. Okay, we have a daily release of daily data, and then we have a snapshot where all the monthly calculations are taking part. And we have basically nightly tests, making sure that we have, first of all, a full sync between our data lake and our production databases, and that we actually showing new data. Okay, it's very, I mean, right, it's supposed to happen that if you have, I don't know, hundreds of data sets, that somewhere you will get a zero, right? So we are always testing that we are not missing anything. This is like the critical test I'm always talking about with my teams. Please, when you are releasing a feature with new data, make sure that next month we will see numbers. It's like the dummiest test, but you always lose something. Yeah, I think this is the main area. I mean, we have multiple tests in place, for units, but I don't think it's like the most relevant now.
Yeah, testing is moving from units to data units and results.
What product, at the end of the day, you're delivering, an experience to users. They slice and dice, they look at data from different angles, and user experience is great and fast. But what sort of are your guiding, I would say, product principles? How do you think about, the user experience? How fast, how slow query is not good enough to be in the UI? How much does engineering needs to be pushed to come with ideas to make things sort of smooth from an experience perspective?
Yeah, so there is like general user experience science, and there is also the part of how easy it to use the product. So we are talking about basically time to insight in Similarweb. I mean, what is, how many actions and how long does it take to get an insight from our huge data sets? I think in terms of performance, I really believe that, and Google has a lot of articles about it, that in some point, let's say around, 5 to 10 seconds, this is where you are starting to losing it, especially now that we are so used for instant messaging. And the user will wait for this report, but he won't play with the data and won't slice it over and over again and drill down if every action takes now 10 to 15 seconds, sorry. Okay, it won't happen, and we see it in the data. We did several revolutions in the last year or so, taking data sets from Athena to other operational databases, or starting a POC with, a low engine and then taking it with a more robust cluster or whatever the solution is. And we see the difference. We see more number of queries per users as we increase the performance. And this is from the performance side. And the other part is, how do we take the most relevant piece of data and expose it to the customer as soon as possible? We didn't crack it perfectly yet, but we're having more and more step into it. That the onboarding experience will be that you define who you are, what is your market or competitors, and we will give you the most interesting part of data.
Another question I had in mind. So how do you guys hire? I mean, you're hiring engineers for the data server team, but the skill set you require is not a trivial one. So what's the strategy there?
Yeah, so in general, hiring is not easy these days. Hiring backend developers or data engineers is really tough, especially experienced ones. We are focusing on hiring smart people, good engineers, with one of the aspects of our stack, and we are understanding that we will have to have this ramp up and learning curve for the other part. So if we have a strong backend engineer, we want to believe that he will be able to pretty quickly take over our backend stack, and then we will give him all he needs to know about data engineering. And if we are getting a strong data engineer, we believe that he will be able to track with our backend stack. So basically, I don't think we ever hired someone that is really fully stacked with both data engineering and backend development.
So for that team, essentially, you're looking for both. You would get both data engineering oriented people and backend.
I think that I always tell my backend team that part of my problem is that once you are in Similarweb, so you are like a superstar. Yeah, you can do everything. So it's a very, very desired material in the market. But yeah, our stack is not trivial. And again, I think also, BI developments got more and more complex over the years, but they usually have a different mission, because most of the processing is happening offline. And we are taking care of a really big stack of production data stack. What makes the challenge bigger.
So for all these years running a data stack in production, which were the most sensitive or error prone or risky areas that ended up causing on average more errors in production that you had hoped for? Like if you would go back in time, knowing what you know now, which areas would you have tackled to make, for less incidents in production?
You were asking like what should we improve?
I mean, most at the end of the day, the incidents that you guys happened that affected the experience, were they more in the data versioning, the ETLs, query serving, mismatch of schema issues? I don't know. What were the most sensitive areas in retrospect?
Yeah, so I think above all, important to say, we are running full. Like we have 2 regions that we are maintaining. So we have basically a hot backup on 2 regions, because that happens. Okay, we are managing historically HBase cluster, and things happen, and we have a very, very structured methodology of shifting from one region to another. And that's something that we know how to do, and usually happen, machine errors. This happens other times. We realized that data validation, like again, between the data lake and the actual database is a very, very critical thing. Again, our customers are buying data from us. So in that, saying that, it's a very bad experience if you are querying data and getting one response, and the next day you will get a different number. Okay, so this is also something that we experienced. By the way, in various areas, it can be that we had some historical bug that when loading data, and because we are writing in batches, we have a daily batch or monthly batch. So writing to DynamoDB, we had some bug between, in the Spark client actually, that we realized that we are just losing rows on the way to Dynamo, and it wasn't logged very well. So we just, in that case, you have keys in the data lake that doesn't exist in production. It happened when we just loaded data that wasn't synced well. So the numbers, we didn't have the same rows count or same aggregation count between the query engine and our data lake. So we added many tests around these areas. And eventually you will be surprised, even UI can create some issues, because sometimes during, teamwork, so you're saying, okay, it's just a simple average. I will do it in JavaScript. But then, the customer get maybe a different experience, because one developer, wrote the code for the client, for the graph, and one for the Excel in the backend, and one for the API. And then you have some tiny number typos that usually you will say, who cares? But, our customer cares. It's important to mention, some of our customers they have many data analysts that getting our data in batches, from API, and they are doing the math. They don't need the UI. So in their world, if we have tiny bias all over the place, it's a big deal.
What parts are of the stack today do you sort of consider legacy and are planned to be phased out in the next year or so?
I don't know if phased out. We are doing a lot of exploration around changing the way we are maintaining the HBase clusters today. So we have we need, it's basically a technical debt during the years. We used to have some very nice hacks in the old versions for how we prepare the data files actually to HBase and how we manage the clusters. So this is something that we are working on strongly. Other than that, we are we understand that we need the ability to be able, as much as we can, to serve from same data source for features that are using the same data. Okay, pre-calculation, again, it's great in terms of performance, but the developer experience can be very bad. Okay, imagine that now it happens a lot, that you need to take one aggregation over an existing data set. So you have this dilemma, will I calculate it again? And then you have, hundreds of transitioning all over the place, and it's really hard to track. Or you want to execute the query on the fly, and then the performance penalty is always the question.
AAP, aggregation analysis paralysis. Given that you're aggregating the everything that's out there in terms of data, can you share with us kind of how fast the universe of data is expanding? Meaning that it's constantly growing. How much of a challenge is that? How fast is data growing, given that, right, it's not per user, it's actually just massive granular data points across so many industries. How fast is it growing?
So yeah, I can tell that we have data sets where we are loading every month, let's say 2 terabytes for a single database. So actually, we are seeing an increase also in coverage. So we want to cover more and more from the internet. I believe we are not seeing everything, all the darknet and areas that doesn't exist, but we have more and more websites. And also in the internet area, think that you have new websites every day. I think this is where the main challenge, because it's you don't have an absolute number of entities. It's like growing. The entities are growing. So maybe the data is not always like in exponential growth, but the number of entities is like endless. Keywords is something that all 3 of us want to buy jeans, but we will search for different terms, right? Because Eldad loves
I search for skinny.
Yeah, I thought Eldad for the skinny, but yeah. So these data sets are growing massively because the entities are being changed. Of course, you have the baseline, but by the way, we are exploring it a lot, and we are seeing that keywords especially are changing on a daily basis. Think about our life. So today we have, the Russia-Ukraine war, okay? 10 years ago, you had something else, and today you have some fashion trend, and tomorrow you will have some fashion trend, and you have NFT today, and then SpaceX and Tesla, and every day it's something else. So the information is endless. And for that reason, you cannot assume that most of your data is the same. The opposite. Most of your data will be changed.
Cardinality is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. But, and I will, that reminds me, eventually we serve the entire internet, but our customers are not querying the entire internet. So in that matter, something that I really want us to be able to do in the next couple of years is to find solutions where we can optimize what our customers are more interested in, and then, to have a better a more cost-effective solution to give a very robust solution for the data customers are really querying, and having some cold storage for whatever just need to be there and can be queried sometime somewhere.
Is you brought up cost, which is we didn't cover it, and it's interesting for a company like Similarweb. Yeah. How predictable is cost these days, and how tough is it to manage?
So also from colleagues in Similarweb and out of Similarweb, I know it's tough. Actually, this was one of the first actions I took when I got into this role. I'm really glad that I did it, because we did some cross action again for the data server team. And now we are tagging every Spark cluster, every database, every table, each ETL running. So I have a very, very good granularity to know for a specific feature, the entire cost from the ETL and the ingest and the data serving, the databases, the staging, the development. So I have a very good visibility, but otherwise it's impossible. I mean, I think the number of roles and tags that I have today in our stack, it's something that you cannot manage if you don't have a standard.
You need a data warehouse to manage your tags.
Yeah, actually, no, that's a very good tip. I think as soon as you do that, you can control. Again, shit happens, but at least you can know on a real time what happened. So is that, and it's happened to me every week. I think there is no week that I'm not, slacking to one of our engineers and what the hell is that? Why is that on? Okay, I see some anomaly, in a specific table for a specific team. So that's very, very important, because otherwise you don't know what happened. You just know that you have a bias of, I don't know, $10,000. Now go figure it out. So managing your tags.
Keep your tags close.
Yeah, close, as close as can be. This is awesome, Yoav. I mean, super inspiring, I think. I mean, it's rare to see products that are so deeply driven by data. And I've personally played with Similarweb product, and it is absolutely amazing. The levels of experience you get there, the breadth of analysis coupled with such a great user experience in terms of speed and insight is something definitely to learn from. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, Bob.
And see you around.
See you around. Thank you, Yoav.
Thank you, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So we've launched just a few months ago. We're growing quite nicely, right?
Yes.
How many views do we have?
Very happy.
I think we've got we're in the thousands, right?
Happy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, not bad. But we want more. If you like this, help us spread the love.
Yes.
If you don't like Eldad, spread,
vote for replacing me for someone else. That's fine.
And we promise to try our best to keep bringing
You're amazing, boss.
the data people from the most interesting data companies. So subscribe, make our mama proud, help us out.
Love you, mom.